So, hi everybody. My name is Kim Martin. I am a Sidebar member here in Sidebar, which is a invite-only exclusive, but yet not too exclusive. You guys can all join us as well. Community of leaders. Several of us are from the product organizations, but we also have operators and we also have founders as well. And we are a group of go-givers, as our Chief Community Officer Ha would say. We are very much about the values of generosity, giving, and integrity as well. So we have these sidebar sessions where we invite exclusive speakers to speak with us, share their knowledge, their frameworks, and give practical and strategic advice along with practical frameworks for you to use immediately after these sessions. And it is a pleasure and a privilege, I think, to welcome Garrett Kelly. Garrett is here with us today as co-founder and managing partner of Next Step. It's a consulting firm that helps startup leaders with strategy and planning, operational excellence, and people first leadership. He operates as a fractional consultant, advisor, executive coach, and if I understand correctly, COO as well. At Swimply, in a previous role, he led customer support, trust, safety, and insurance, along with being responsible for OKRs, KPIs, the core values, and prioritization across the business. So he was definitely helping Swimply run and scale. At Airbnb, Garrett also led a 500 plus safety team's product process and people strategy while managing the most urgent and sensitive community issues imaginable. Thinking about Airbnb, I'm sure there's some great stories you cannot tell us.
Right. Some I can, some I probably shouldn't. But if I were to ever write a book, it would certainly be about each of those stories because I had no idea what people were capable of until I worked there for 7 years. And
Awesome.
now I still don't know fully what they're capable of. But I have a better idea.
Wonderful. So, Garrett, did I miss anything? Let us know. And just for everybody else's awareness as well, we are very much engaged in chat. Please feel free to continue to chat and include any comments that you have. We'll make sure to capture them. But Garrett, did I miss anything? You want to add anything?
That was wonderful. Thank you for the intro. Um, I'll get started then. Thank you, Kim, so much for the intro. Thank you, everyone, for coming today and taking time out of your busy days to be here. In the morning, especially. Hopefully, y'all had your coffee already. So, as you probably see on the screen and you read through the invite, this chat will be on strategy and planning, two different concepts, with a integration of AI, because this is the new hot topic of the day, year, decade, maybe century. So everyone wants to hear about it. We're at the forefront of it. So I'm going to start by talking more about the realities of AI and the landscape we're in, how to integrate or incorporate AI well, ideally, and then go into the strategy and planning side of things, which is the season we're in. As Kim mentioned, I really don't like to talk for 30, 40 straight minutes and then have a conversation with y'all. I'd really love to have a conversation as I present. I will have a prompt or two through the slides that I'll engage and ask people to answer a question or two or provide some thought work feedback to a question or prompt. Otherwise, feel free to chat, utilize the chat as much as you want. If you have a question, just throw it in there as I go. And I'm going to rely on Kim to review the chat and just interrupt me and stop me and answer that question. And so please utilize that. Please make it a conversation, less a lecture. I would really appreciate that. And hopefully you get more out of it that way. Without further ado, I kind of did a high level summary of this, but this will be the overall agenda of what I want to go through today. So as I mentioned, first three parts, AI, planning calendar. This is, as Kim mentioned, I did this at Airbnb and Swimply. Now I do this for clients. I do it sometimes as just this is the season, and so they'll contract me for the month or two, and they'll fly me out and I'll do it the offsite with the executive team, or I'll take their departments, the executive team, and then the departments through workshops on a longer term basis. I'll go through my process for that and what I think a good planning cycle looks like. And then I have a list of about five exercises that I take leadership teams through to help sanity check the reality of their value proposition, differentiation, the external landscape, internal performance capabilities to try to get everyone aligned on the same page. And then from there, deciding strategically what's the right AI investment to make, since that is, again, the theme of the day, year, decade, century. And then I have some resources at the end that I'll just share with you so you can have them, but everyone will have access to these slides. So the templates and exercises you'll have. The exercises I built, I've linked in a slide. I'll tell you when we get there. Those will be shared, and you can just open them. They're free to the public. Anyone can take them and use them if you want to. Okay. So this slide is really about the reality of today. Most of you probably know most of this slide to be true or irrelevant, and so points one, two, and three um, is just where we're at today. So it's just sort of a sanity check on the age of AI. My viewpoint, we're at the very beginning of this AI revolution. It's starting to get adoption. People are talking about it everywhere, but it hasn't really reached strong utilization and dissemination across industries. There's a lot of this fear mongering and talk about once it does, what it will look like. I'm not going to go into that today, but just high level, I'll let you read this slide. One thing I'll note here, because I don't know if everyone's heard of this, but for the cost pressures, um, from the 2010s to 2020, everything was about growth at all costs, right? VCs were just throwing money. Like I was at Airbnb and we were a money cannon. We had a lot of investment, we were making a lot of money, and so I ran a host guarantee program that had a $1 million value to it. And so, as the head of safety, I had the ability to just issue $1 million if it deemed proper per policy in the situation. I didn't have to, thankfully, but it was really just a lot of money. That changed with the pandemic, and we're now in a reality where it's not growth at all costs, it's efficient growth responsibly. And so, this rule of 50 is what investors are looking for more so now. And so, to get to Series B, C, D, et cetera, you can't just show growth, you have to show disciplined growth. And so the rule of 50 is, let's say you have 50% growth rate, then you need to be at a zero cost EBITDA. Um, if you have 100% growth, you could have a negative 50 EBITDA and be fine because you're growing at such a high rate, it's okay to be in the negative for costs. If you have a 30% growth rate, you should probably be at a 20% EBITDA to get to that 50. Um, that means that utilizing AI is more important now for businesses to try to be more efficient in order to maintain that discipline. There's many other ways to do it as well, but with the investor scrutiny, every client I work with, the investors at every board meeting around this time of year saying, "What's your AI strategy?" I've gotten some pushback from folks that I work with saying, "Well, we don't want one this next year. We don't need one." And I say, "That's fine, but let's go through the thought work because what your investors and the board will want to hear is that you've gone through this work, you've thought through all of the opportunities, risks, dependencies, external landscape competition, and that where you've landed on your strategy is makes logical sense based on those realities and that you've thought through, and then they can agree with that because you've done that legwork." And so it's not so much about doing AI for the sake of doing AI, which we'll get to a little bit later. It's about thinking thoughtfully about if you're going to do AI, why and what will it impact and why is that important? So four is what we're going to talk about mostly today. So again, one through three is just the reality we're facing and the context we're operating within. We're going to talk more so today about setting your strategy, which I define as deciding where to play and how to win, and then planning. Phase one, agreeing on the reality, then picking your big bets that you think will deliver the most value for the things that you care about and think that will help you win. And then the key part here, it's all key. I shouldn't say the key part here, but I think the key part that most organizations struggle with or fail at is they set a strategy, they do the sweet offsite, all the perks, all the swag, um, bring in a ton of people. They go back, they say, "We have this great strategy," and then it falls apart almost instantly, and they get back to being reactive. And my view on why that happens, there's a few things, but the biggest failure is they most organizations don't think to realign their organization and resources around the strategy to make sure it's successful. They stay in their siloed marketing teams, sales teams, operating teams, customer support teams, engineering, product, etc., the classical model. They don't organize around the strategic bets or pillars to say, here's a cross-functional pod or group that your sole focus outside of your core function of being a sales manager, et cetera, or marketing manager is delivering on this strategic pillar. And organizing your resources with around the intention of executing your strategy is super important. Um, but I'll hop off that sandbox and keep going. I hear this a lot too from clients. Well, like AI, like 95%, they cite the study, they just don't work and they fail. Like there's all this hype around AI, but it feels like hype. all these pilots are failing and it's not really getting adopted in a successful way. Why should we do it? And looking into the data, this is from an MIT study. These are the common pitfalls and why AI pilots fail. Flawed integration with business workflows. This is the one I see the most because my background was trust and safety, customer support operations, customer facing work. A lot of it's inbound volume and responding to it. And so, how do we be cost effective? There's the big move to outsourcing to be cheaper. And that comes with its own difficulty in management and quality control and training, etc. Language barriers. So, anyone who's done that work knows you have to build really clear workflows, really clear policies, and then really robust training and quality management systems for that to work really well and be consistently accurate outcomes. A lot of people want to just implement a chatbot and then train the chatbot without those foundations in place. And then the chatbot is all over the place and the outcomes aren't consistent and customers have to keep abandoning and go to someone internal. Some organizations you've probably read in the news cut their teams when they do this without thinking through, and then they have to rehire the teams because it failed miserably. That's why. So I work with teams to build their knowledge management repository, define their policies, make clear workflows, et cetera, so that when they integrate AI, AI has the right inputs to create the best outputs. Garbage in, garbage out. Um, Lack of adoption and cultural inertia are about culture and people. If people think AI is coming in to take their jobs, they're less likely to want to train the thing or to integrate the thing because it's going to replace them. So a lot of what this comes down to, which overlaps with strategy and planning, is the why and making sure you're bringing your teams along and helping them be a part of it and explaining what this is, why we're doing it, and what reality will look like once it lands, and reassuring them, ideally, in a situation where it won't just take their jobs and you're not lying to them, so don't do that, in a way where you get to work together to achieve a common goal and outcome as a team. If they don't get those things, they're less likely to want to do it or help or support because it's not transparent and they're afraid. And then failure is a lot about what goal did we set and did we hit the goal? OKRs basically say you should be hitting 70% of the goals and that's success. So how you're defining success, um, by the nature of how definition of success, you'll fail if you don't hit it. So a lot of people think this is the saving grace. AI will come in and solve all of our problems right away. It's this magic bullet. It's not. It's still human led and it's still something that needs to be managed, monitored. Like I mentioned, garbage in, garbage out, and executed especially or really intentionally. And so when people have outblown expectations and it doesn't deliver on it, it's considered a failure, but that's more of a perception, expectation game. Here's how to do it well. So those are the pitfalls to work out for. I mentioned one already. I mentioned two already. I mentioned three already. So if you have the right foundations, really clear process and automation, those are key. And then it's going to know what to do and deliver consistent outcomes for you. So it's predictable. Then you work with people and their skills to prototype and communicate the why so everyone's on board and you're able to have effective top of funnel development or building or integration in a responsible way. Then org governance and readiness. I hear people bring this one up, like we need to have all this stuff right away before we build anything. And in the age of startups, it's just like validate something, put it out in the world. Once you feel like, okay, this is the thing, then put these governance and guardrails around it. Don't do it too early because it might be a waste of time and resources to do so. Once you've done all of this, you're safe, it's accurate, it's consistent, it's has the right constraints around it, the right focus, and you've validated it and then you've protected it. Then step five, you look into your strategic expansion of it and only decide at this point if this is a key part of your value proposition or just an efficiency play to help you get those EBITDA marks I talked about earlier. And then the ultimate goal, I got this from Brian Chesky. He would say this all the time, CEO of Airbnb, skate to where the puck is going. Don't let ignorance or complacency and a lack of awareness around what AI can do for you and what your competitors are doing put you behind the eight ball. The ultimate goal is to lead in your space. And the reality is that we're moving in a direction where AI will be critical to that. And it might not be this year where you do anything with it. That's fine. You just need to make sure you're doing this thought work, and we'll go through it next to make sure you have the right strategy for your business and the customers you serve. I will not read through this. It's a lot of words and it'll bore you. But from left to right, and everyone will have access to these slides. So I don't usually like to put this much words on a slide, but I felt like this was a good one slide to rule them all of sorts from a strategy template perspective, so you can have it and read through it afterward. But from left to right, this is in order from top to bottom, how I think about strategy and execute it. And then left to right, what's the thing? What does it mean? And here's an example of what Airbnb is, how Airbnb has done it. And this is a recent Airbnb um, strategic st pillar strategy template, whatever. Um, Not the vision mission that's been around for a while. Current state reality check, for example, for Airbnb is they've had their supply growth has been slowing. They have a lot of regulatory scrutiny rising. This was always the case when I was there, but it's actually at a head right now. They've been completely banned from certain cities. Where I live in Portland, Oregon, you have to live in your primary home. If you want to rent more than 3 bedrooms, you have to only be able to rent it 90 days out of the year. And you have to sign you have to apply for a land use permit that's been designed for completely something else throughout history, and it costs $9,000 just to apply for it. So totally different world. And so that's the reality check they have to operate within. And doing that reality check helps inform what their goals and strategic targets are, strategic pillars, etc. And then it's about, like I mentioned earlier, resource alignment. And then the last thing I haven't talked about is operating system, which is my specialty. It's some of it I mentioned with the org structure around organizing your teams around the strategic plan for the year. Um, I like pods. There's many other ways to do it, but the idea in operating system is you have the pods, you have the structure. Now, what is your daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly cadence and process look like for delivering your roadmap, analyzing what's working, what's not, pivoting, how you running these businesses, when do you audit and change your goals, quarterly ideally, monthly, what's the business review and how are things going, what's on track and going well and gonna hit, what's slightly off track and stagnant, and what's off track and getting worse, and how are we taking all this information to constantly do a reality check to iterate and improve so we're staying focused on our strategy, not abandoning it at the first sign of chaos. So this is where I'd love to ask some questions now. This was a real life strategy that we started with for a client of mine. And let's start at number one. What's wrong with this as an objective? So this is an OKR framework. So these are all the objectives they started with. You can type in chat, Kim can read it, or we can just speak up.
Too general for number one.
Yeah. What else?
Yes, so we've got some comments in chat, lack of quantitative goals. There are no targets. It's not SMART, as in SMART goals. What does
Yep.
efficiency even mean?
Right.
How does it even tie to company and business objectives?
Exactly. So a big failure, like this isn't a strategy, right? Everyone wants to be profitable and for that profit to be sustainable. Like that is not a strategy is meant to be some level of how, where we'll win and how we'll get there. And so it has to be about a behavior or a lever we're pulling to achieve profitability. Yes, profitability is the end goal, but that's not a strategy. It's an end game. So this is where we ended up landing. So um, build a resilient, efficiency-driven growth engine for 2026. So how we need to work on our go-to-market growth engine. And this is better because it focuses on behaviors and how we'll get there, not the outcomes in and of themselves. This also kind of was like we took number two and kind of moved it into number one a bit. And so um, I'll say, why is two not great? Or ask. I think a lot of the feedback from the first one probably applies to this one too, so we'll move on. But wasn't smart, pretty general. What does efficiency mean? To what degree? We changed this to win in core markets. This is the where. So the first is a how, the second is a where. There was a lot of debate within the executive team on should we expand into other regions or markets? Should we go beyond the US? Should we just try to win in the US? Within the US, are we expanding within the current markets that we've seen the most success at, or are we trying to take those successes and repeat them in different regions or cities? Um, we determined that it's best there's a lot of room to grow in the current markets we're in, and we haven't built a repeatable, efficient go-to-market growth engine with the right channels because a lot of the channels that have had success were drying up. So we need the playbook and we need to validate it where we're already successful. If we're able to do that really well this year, then we can grow outward into different cities because we now have a playbook that we know works. Oops. Why is the third one not great?
Garrett, there were some comments that I just saw regarding the second one, and there was one specifically talking about not being able to measure from X to Y by Z date.
Yes. So these are the objectives. The key results tied to each objective go into the measurables of how do we know we've won in a core market? What does success look like? How do we know we've gotten there? And then the key results go into like the specific measurables that tell us that that's true. So objectives are more about this. The key results measure whether or not we're doing that or achieving that. And that's not on this slide. What about 3? Most people have a strategic objective or pillar that focuses on their customers, and if they don't, that's a problem. And so it's like, how do we frame this? What is it about customer value or customer satisfaction that we want to focus on?
I
Everyone
think
wants to lead. Go ahead.
I think for me, something that I've struggled with in all three of these is any kind of differentiation or any kind of distinction that's reflective of the organization and overall like what they should be creating value for in the market. That's just what I've been seeing as a I've just been struggling with in all three of these.
Yeah, exactly. These are all various obvious things that every single person wants to do. So they're not differentiated, they're not unique to you. They don't make any, they're not bets. It's not a risk, right? It's a statement of an outcome, each of these to a point that tells us we made it, but it doesn't say how we're going to do it or where we're going to put our resources and what risks are we going to take. So for this client, it's a really crowded space. And a lot of the plays, do we go cheap volume? Do we go really, really high end and expensive? Um, Either decided not to go cheap and volume play because the margins just weren't there. But if we deliver the most trusted premium experience, like the first statement is customers don't, we need to do it from what customers care about. We'll talk about that in a little bit too with one of the exercises, but you don't tell your customers we're leading. They tell you whether you're leading based on the experience they have and the loyalty they give you and how much they refer others and rave about you. So it's not too far off from the same statement. It's just a different framing of who are we serving and how are we going to serve them. So we need to focus on building trust and making it feel premium to the customer so that they feel like Amazon. Um, People who use Amazon a lot and do the shipping feel like they're getting a way outsized value for what they're paying for it. And for something as expensive as this client's services, that's hard to do. But if they can make sure that customers feel premium value, that's big. And so we need to deliver white glove premium service. We need to totally overhaul our service delivery model to provide a more white glove service because right now it's just reactive and not good enough if we're actually talking about trust and premium. So this is the annual planning calendar that I execute and go through. I don't think this is necessarily the best or the one everyone should follow to a T. It is there's always the balance that I personally struggle with of structure versus velocity and adaptability. I tend to lean a little bit over on structure and I try to implement exercises and facilitate workshops that are as efficient as possible to help people work through challenges, problems, concepts, ideating solutions, etc., quickly. So this September, October, November, December, it feels very long, but ideally there's only a few days in each month where we're really focusing on these things because everyone has their day jobs and are super busy doing what they're trying to do already. So, but I found this to be really effective as a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 phase approach to how to think through planning. So the first is what we talked about earlier, context gathering. The key, a lot of people get in trouble because they just go into the offsite and they say, cool, let's start agreeing. My thing is, no, 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 no. We all need to agree on the realities before we go into the offsite. So we're all operating on the same understanding of what truth is. And we have that foundation to build on, or else we're going to debate realities for half the offsite, and then we've wasted so much time. Then you go executive strategy. What's the brief that we're going to hand down to departments? Then departments have to build their strategy to funnel up to the executive strategy. You don't want all these different strategies competing against each other, undermining each other. Cross-functional, this is most common with engineering teams. There's a shared resource that serves all other teams. Depends on your org, but this is more common that it's the engineering team. And so they have to stack rank their roadmap against everyone else's needs. And so when you have this KR over here, this metric over here, this team over here, how do we balance out what matters to the business across all these cross functions? And so there's different frameworks and templates I have that I'll share on how I've done that with teams. And then you go through your headcount, request, resource ask, budget approval, implement the operating system, try to do a culture of progress and accountability, and then you hit the ground running, and a disciplined operating model helps you execute it. Okay. I'm going to rip through these because I want to leave as much time as possible for discussion, but who knows what job to be done means? Any comments? I can't see chat. Nothing.
Uh, not as of, yes, the McDonald's shake. Yes. We've got some chatters now. We've got Joe saying in the planning calendar, how do you tackle the run the business versus innovate the business? And then get to the conversation of realigning the team to attain the executive strategy.
Let me go through the exercises, because that's sort of like a holistic question, and one of the exercises goes into that. So let's save that one and please remind me of it once we get through them. So when a business starts, there's an assumption. They're all hypothesizing what customers are their ICP. Based on that ICP, what they'll value about this product, and then they create this and try to validate it with the customers to say, like, were we right? You can be partially right, you can have some growth, but what I've realized with a lot of businesses too is the initial assumptions aren't really tested or changed. They kind of like keep assuming that they're valuable because there's some level of success and growth. And this is a reframing. The job to be done is like, what do your customers actually value and care about? Like, what features are they using and what problem does that solve for them? People don't buy drills to own drills. They hire drills to make holes in things. So as a very basic example, this is a template you can take, list the features that you think are the biggest value propositions or differentiators for your customers that you think they care about. Go through these three questions or exercises within this slide to validate whether that's true or not. A lot of this comes from the sales team. Sales talk to the customers. They're the ones who know who's buying and why they're buying. A good organization categorizes and records what was the thing that converted to them giving you money. A lot of customers will tell you what they want and what they like. The thing that speaks most is what they'll be willing to pay for. That's the proof. Internal risk heat map. So this is the problems. So when I go through this with organizations, I have each individual executive from their vantage point and their area of expertise and what they see. What are the key problems that you think are happening within the business that have the most impact to threaten your business, whether that's revenue, reputation, operational efficiency, growth, velocity. How fast could this problem escalate and cascade if left unchecked? And then I don't like this framing, but it's a part of the exercise. Kill shot. If you had to pick one of these, so it has yes, no below, it's the idea is which of these do you think is the single most existential risk? And I say these, I usually go through and say, Mark, whatever you think at a first glance, don't overthink it, and then whittle down from there to pick the one. Um, it helps just frame what are the real problems we're facing, because the struggle with a lot of people is like, feel problem, say problem. And it's like, well, how often does it happen? How many people is it happening to? If left unchecked, like what business product flow is this impacting? Is it affecting conversion or payment stuff, or is it affecting an ancillary feature that isn't really that utilized, right? And so it's helping to frame like how big is this thing and how much does it matter? How much should we prioritize resources to addressing it? Can't boil the ocean. This one's about the competitive landscape, sort of the realities we're facing aspect. On the left, you'll see the competitor is an incumbent. So someone that maybe has the market share or has been around maybe a little longer than you if you are not that. Boutique, someone who's specialized in some unique way. And then a low-cost AI entrant being the world we're in. Everyone's vibe coding and coming up with AI tools to just automate everything. A lot of junk in there, but still a significant risk that should be evaluated and looked at. If you were them, what attack would you make? What weakness would you exploit? What offer would you make? It's kind of viewing yourself from an outside perspective, helps challenge assumptions. AI impact stress test, similar to the problems one earlier. This is just like thinking through all of the possible risks specific to AI in the world we live in. How likely is it? How urgent is it? And the risk score. And then if you had $1 million, what would you do? And again, I'm ripping through these, but you'll have access to them so you can use them. This kind of goes to the question a little bit that was asked. I forget by who a second ago that I asked to save to the end. Most of you have probably heard of Blue Ocean. I put this together as sort of a variation of it to a degree. Um, Feature or factor is what a buyer evaluates when purchasing. So what's valuable to them? Everyone knows low cost is people want to pay less for things. The speed in which things happen and they get. How what's the service depth? How white glove is it, et cetera, et cetera. How much that truly matters again to the buyer's decision and experience. So what converts to them actually paying for the thing, and then industry investment, how much time, money, effort is the industry you're currently working within invest in it. Then you map it. So if something you believe has really strong customer value that you can validate to some degree, it's not just a baseless assumption, and there's low industry investment, this is a massive opportunity in your space to invest in. So this is a create high investment, high industry, or sorry, high customer value, high industry investment. This is a more competitive space, but you should raise the bar because this is what customers are telling you they care about, and that should not be ignored, even if it's competitive. Just do it better. And then if it's low value, why are we doing it? Okay, this is the three exercises I built. It's I tried to keep it high level. It's about how to set your strategy and a framework to do so. I use the OKRs for this. Then roadmap, follow the thing. How do you tie your initiatives and your bets to the key results? I didn't have on the slide earlier, but they're in there. You have top-down objectives, key results, initiatives. And initiatives should be tied to the key results for the most part, in my opinion. It doesn't always work perfectly because you want to do things that impact measurable things that help you achieve objective. And then there's a prioritization framework in there to think through how to stack rank them, what comes first, second, third, fourth, etc. And then the org design, how to reorg and structure and assign ownership to the strategy to help it be successful. Yeah, last slide. I'll let you read it. This is mostly just a summary of what I've already talked about. I don't know if you're actually here. I initially built this in September, so we were definitely there then. Hopefully some of you are a little further along the way, but it's okay if you're not. No time like the present. Any questions? I'll just leave it there.
Hey Garrett, there was a comment that I thought was a little interesting because it did pose a bit of a challenge. Ali had said that they weren't sure the better examples on the objectives of the one slide that you were prompting us on were actually still specific enough. They still seem to have some big direction, like growth engine, etc. And what specifically about the growth engine? So could you talk a little bit more about specificity versus perhaps expansion?
Yeah, I think for strategic objectives, you don't need to be that specific. It's just going to become a long sentence potentially, and the measurables are in the key results. So the objective is sort of that high level aspirational statement of how or where. Um, and I think that's fine. And then you define it and have a description around it separately, and then the key results help tell you more, and then what you prioritize to drive it helps tell you more. So there's always a balance there. Sometimes you can be high level. At Airbnb, they used metaphors a lot. And so it was like, what does that mean? And they had to explain it. And so there's some branding and design that went into how they talked about strategy. Some get really, really specific. I would say you shouldn't have a measurable thing in your objective. That's what the key results are for. But again, that's the OKR framework. You don't have to use that one. You can set strategy in a totally different way where you do it that way. The key for me is the how and the where. That's the most important thing, not the outcome or the what.
And we have another comment. You mentioned working with premium market brand. I think more companies should think about things that we humans always want, no matter how inefficient. Sometimes good friction is what we actually want after AI automates everything.
Could you elaborate on what you mean by good friction?
So I think one of the things I'm thinking, standing in line in a coffee shop, you could purchase order it much faster, but actually going there to see the people, to meet people standing in line, is something that actually we enjoy as a human.
Hmm.
So what are those kind of areas that are left over after AI automate major of the process, make everything frictionless, right? I think those are maybe the areas some companies thinking about how they should approach their, I guess, future strategies.
Is sort of the heart of the question in this world of more automation and standardization and robotic maybe interactions that people will crave more of the slower pace or the more human aspect of experiences. And so how should businesses think about that dichotomy?
Correct, right? Especially when you mention about
Yeah.
like the upmarket brand, the premium brand, right? They're selling exclusivity
Yeah.
and it might be inefficient, right? Like, but then people would do it because it's different.
Yeah, I'll share more about the business model because it's a marketplace that connects people together, one that has a certain skill set and others that are younger trying to get somewhere. And so there's a mentorship aspect, a human element, a relationship. So the efficiency, to your point, I think, is about not making people do things they don't want to do and shouldn't have to do and doing it for them in a way that's intelligent, smart, thoughtful, and makes it feel like we know what they're going through. We're proactive with what we think they need, and we're giving them information to help them know what to expect, feel confident and comfortable that they're in good hands, and that there's a plan and that they believe the plan is a good one for them. Then the human element is making sure the people that provide the service um, to the demand side of the business are constantly building the connection, providing the proper mentorship, continually setting those expectations, aligning with the plan, updating the resources to further drive intelligent automation. And I think every business needs to be balancing what is their business? What do the customers actually value and want out of it? Is it human? It depends. Some of it is more human, some of it's not. But for the human element, how do we design and build in experiences that people actually value? It's hard sometimes. Sometimes people tell you what they want and they're wrong, and they actually don't want it because when it comes, they don't do it and don't utilize it. But good customer research, good piloting, constant validation, and balancing experience and premium versus just cheap automation is important. I don't know if I answered your question, but that was my musings on it.
No, you did. Um, I think part of the what we're building in the vibe coding before in the camp, essentially, we want to spend time thinking and doing things. I just kind of get your perspective on where do you think people want to spend their glucose on, right? Versus some mundane stuff. Like there are all the things we want to spend our glucose on.
Yeah, I like that framing. Everything's calories, everything's energy. Yeah, and that's a good question. I mean, and the vibe coding boot camp. I don't know if you remember, my project was to combat intellectual atrophy in the age of AI because I was worried that we would outsource our thinking and decision making and communicating and writing to AI to tell us what to say, what to think, how to feel about a thing. I think there's been plenty of studies that said like some of what the top three usages are like therapy and medical things. Don't quote me on that. 67% of stats are made up, that one included. And so I tried to build a tool that was AI guided to help people think critically around first principles, root cause analysis. And by doing it, my hope was that people would practice and build a habit and a mental map around how to think critically, to not outsource it, but I still have a lot of validation to do. So your question's a good one, and I do not know the answer yet, and maybe never, because that's a tough one. Any other questions?
Yeah, we do. So I'm actually going to ask Sonali if you could just come off mute and ask your question.
Hi, Garrett. So my question is around the organization design as well as governance, because there's a lot of conversation around why, when it comes to AI transformation, the organization structure, design, and governance needs to be different from what in a regular convention transformation project. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of AI projects are failing right now. So I wanted to get more clarity in your experience. How would you suggest it differs?
Yeah, okay. So it depends on the organization. I tend to work with startups that are between seed and series B or C. Um, if it's a really, really mature organization, this is harder to make these pivots. And so I'm speaking from through the lens of that type of organizational maturity. Let's say you go through this exercise and you've identified 3 to 5 strategic bets. What you're saying when you come up with those bets are these are the levers that we think if we pull them and accomplish them, it'll realize the bigger strategy and we'll accomplish our goals and, butterflies and rainbows. What I recommend is each of these strategic pillars needs to have a single owner, and that single owner needs to identify, I've used the word pod, to create a cross-functional team. Now, they'll still have their sales work, their marketing work, their customer operations daily work, but there's this side project they're a part of that's not just a project, I should say. It's a year-long focus on their primary goal is to achieve that strategic pillar. I think when we set strategic pillars and then we say, cool, achieve it, but there's not a single owner, there's not a concerted effort and alignment of cross-functional resources to deliver it, you still have the siloed problem where you have sales throwing something to marketing saying, hey, I need you to do this for me, bring this back. And they're like, yeah, well, I got this other stuff that's more priority, so like I'm kind of busy, and things just go slow and they're not working together well. So I do kind of the hybrid model of fine, keep your disciplined, like functional focus siloed in that way, but break that up 20% of the time, 30%, whatever is required to achieve it, and make sure there's a single owner or throat to choke to say, like, you're ultimately responsible for this. If this fails, you failed. You need to lead this, and you need to make sure this team is on point in delivering on it.
Thanks.
Yeah. And again, that's my approach. I don't know if that's right for every organization, but I tend to lean to that one as a default.
Joe, do you want to come off mute and ask your question too?
Yeah. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Yeah, so first, just I appreciate the kind of the structure and the frameworks of everything. It got me thinking about a couple of different pieces. But as I was kind of looking through the sequence, right? Do you ever run through like an exercise of, okay, now we've got the executive strategy, we're thinking about it. All right, now let's think about all the ways we fail at this strategy to kind of bring in that contrarian kind of thought of, and
Yeah.
granted, you can never find all blind spots, but you at least bring some blind spots forward before you kind of kick it off.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's funny this time of year, before I gave this presentation, I was seeing on LinkedIn and kind of laughing to myself, like all of these horror stories about planning and offsites and how most are crap and they fail. And here's what it looks like in reality, most places people have been. And I'm like, yeah, I've been there and I've seen that most times too. It's not to say planning and strategy are bad. It's saying that like execution's hard. And if
Yeah.
not done well, it fails. And it's not that it's a bad strategy. A lot of it's just bad execution or a misalignment of what's possible with the resources and skill sets you have, right? So um, I did an exercise through the conscious leadership group once, and it wasn't related to this specifically, but I want to tell it because it's a helpful reframing. It impacted me quite a bit. It was, what problem are you experiencing? Could be personal life or business, whatever. That's like just kind of on your mind and doesn't seem to go away. Or is like for this, it would be like this happens every year. How do we stop the problem from continuing to happen? What's different this time? And the prompt is if you were to make sure that it failed or continue, or the problem continued or perpetuated, what actions would you take? And so I'll take a team through like, here's what I would do to make sure this sucked and failed and was a miserable experience. And they go through it all. And then the team kind of maps out, oh, and then there's a realization moment. Oh shit, we're already doing 2 of those things. So then you have a bigger awareness to stop it, or to get ahead of it or address it. There's a lot of different like templates around SWOT or risk mitigations and contingency planning and things like that too that I think people are helpful. But to your point, I think it's about reserving the space to do that and being thoughtful about how you incorporate that new awareness into your operating model and how you execute the strategy. Does that answer your question?
It does. I appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. It's a good question. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Kenlin, you have a question now as well?
Yeah, I'm going to double click on the cultural resistance against AI. I was curious about like how you've seen, well, there we go, the cultural inertia. What strategies would you or what tactics or what have you seen companies do to address that successfully?
Yeah, I played around with some of the new like beta tools around like beautifying slides, and I thought the images were kind of funny, so I kept it. But
Yeah.
this one's
Cool.
yeah, this one was my favorite, the hockey puck with the mountain. It's like, yeah, okay. But anyways, yeah, one of my clients, I was going through the plan I've been talking about because that's the one I just went through with them. A member of the marketing team told me, he sent me this article, and it was just like that, like AI doesn't work, and teams rebel against it. And my response back to him was, AI strategies aren't inherently bad, but bad AI strategies are, especially when not communicated transparently. And so I'm huge on honesty, transparency everywhere I go. I see in a lot of organizations, there's like, and it's just people, there's a fear of if I'm honest, there'll be a negative reaction, and I want to avoid that negative reaction, so I'm not going to be honest. And my thing is always be honest and trust people to handle the information and trust yourself to be able to respond to how they handle the information. And if you're always honest and always transparent and bring people along, they'll feel valued, they'll feel included, and they're more willing to then want to be a part of it and support it. And through that, you might have disagreement. You probably will. You might have, a little torch waving. You might have people expressing their fears. But if you create that space for them to do it, and then you respond honestly and openly to it, and in a way that feels reasonable and fair, people handle that really well. And so that's usually what I try to coach the executives that I coach to do, and try to give them the words for. And I find it works most of the time, almost every time. You get in trouble when you don't do those things, and then you get caught over your skis, or caught with people perceiving you not being as honest as they feel you could have been. And that's when you really get into trouble. And that's when the cultural inertia problems really set in.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
It's a good question.
And then Jen, you have a question as well. Jen, do you want to come off mute to ask your question?
Sorry. Yeah. Sorry about that. I've been meeting. Hey, Garrett, thank you for this wonderful presentation. I joined halfway, apologies, but super informative. I was just wondering how you'd recommend to apply this level of strategic planning and thinking in the face of a failed AI strategy and relatedly a 50% RIF of your company's headcount.
Ooh, tricky. That's not a fun situation. For more context, was it the AI strategy was meant to be sort of a saving grace of sorts to get to a certain growth point to keep that headcount, and when it failed, the business faced a reality where in order to survive and continue, you needed to do the RIF, or they needed to do the RIF? Okay.
Yeah, it was an investor play.
Got it. Okay. Oh, so you're trying to get funded by a certain timeline based on your cash runway, and then now you have to extend the cash runway kind of situation?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, that's tough. I would go back to this slide. Well, I am going back to this slide, I guess. I don't know what the AI play was, and you don't have to share any detailed information on it or who or what exactly. I won't ask that of you, but I think these things follow a process, and I think what I would come in and advise. I'd have a lot of questions first before I'd advise, to be fair, but with the information I have, what I would try to advise is getting these foundations right, reorganizing the teams to focus on a new set of priorities, and go through this planning cycle to say, what is the reality we face now? Like, let's just get back to what's true today. And part of that is looking back historically on the performance and what worked, what didn't work, and why we got to where we are, and then the external landscape as it stands today, based on what we now have to deal with. And then deciding if it's do we do another AI play, but just do it a lot smarter with what we've learned and focus it more in a very targeted, specific area that will have the greatest outsized impact on what we care about, or a different strategy. I think a lot of this comes down to the thought work and then the alignment that comes from that thought work. And so those exercises, I think, put people in a headspace to really think through all the realities and variables at play, and then try to make the most informed decisions possible for the betterment of the business. That's my broad answer. Without specifics, it's hard for me to get too much more specific, but if you have a follow-up question, please ask. Okay.
Are there any additional questions or comments? Yes, we see Caroline, or yes, Caroline, do you want to come off mute and ask or make your comment?
Sure, yeah. A lot of this feels like, things that maybe were part of planning cycles in the past. Just curious, like of any step in the way, what's got to be the most different with the pace of change? And, I know you talked about cadences for sort of reevaluating, how things are going on a quarterly basis. But, what is what needs to be most different in this like high speed time?
It's a good question. I go back to I think what I shared earlier about the org structure. I think there's two things actually. I think or having a properly organized org structure that's specifically targeted to deliver on these outcomes, and then the operating system to just like how fast are we checking on it, how fast are we pivoting. Most people don't do that super well. The second is like where are the bottlenecks in your organization? And a lot of them are in engineering. Engineers are very expensive, and haven't been a single place where they had a roadmap for a year where they delivered on it. It's first quarter, okay, we launched 80% of it, but now we have a bunch of bugs and tech debt. So now we got to push Q2 to Q3. Now we're in Q2, and okay, these new realities or challenges came in, so we have to like rework some things and shove some things in we didn't plan for. So hey, you team, I know you want all these things, but we have to push you to next year, and it becomes this cat and mouse horse trading game of constantly shifting priorities all year. So anything you can do to leverage the AI tools to help support a faster dev cycle within engineering and product management, I think would be really helpful, as the primary bottleneck, especially when the world is going more product focused and digital focused. That's not the right word I'm looking for, but we'll stay with that. And then the other is like a really clearly aligned org structure and operating system to just rapidly iterate and evolve and move. Those are my best answers.
All right, we have about 4 or 5 minutes left. I just in the chat dropped in a survey link. I'm happy to put up the QR code. At the same time, though, I think if we want to make room for another question to pose to Garrett, this slide seemed to be providing the most value right now. So just want to stick with the slides. Do we have at least one more question to ask Garrett since we've got his attention?
I have a question. So since like AI, like that's a really kind of a continuum. It can go from like just rules based to like full on LLMs, machine learning. Would you like that would be like I guess for step one on that data foundation, I guess at that point, I think it's what am I trying to ask here? I guess how would you build in like the strategy for, whether that the problem requires like something that's more like basic versus one that really needs the organization to build like a more complex model. That makes sense.
I'm muted. It did, but could you contextualize it a bit more so I make sure I'm answering the heart of it?
Yeah, because I'm thinking like, for example, like Google, like the Gmail, like that kind of uses a lot of like a kind of rule-based kind of if-then type of AI questions. But then, others like we have, like SnapDev, for example, like you've got like really, really complex like models or what am I talking about? Like Gemini, like when do you have to build like that whole range of complexity? Like how do we know what data to build with? You know what I mean? Like how do we like hone in on what is that critical data foundation, and then know what to focus on, because there's a lot of data.
Yeah. I try to implement a first principles way of thinking about a thing, and there's a lot of assumptions we have to start with to say, like, who's my customer that will use this? What are they using it for? What will they value with it most? And then therefore, what are the features that will deliver that value? And then within those features, how do we know we're delivering that value? What data are we recording to validate that our assumptions are true? And so if you kind of follow it from the problem you're trying to solve to the customer you're serving to the thing that they care about to the feature you're hypothesizing will align with that value. And then for that feature, what information do we need to know to prove out that this feature is being utilized, valued, resulting in retention, some level of loyalty metrics, utilization metrics, etc. Then that's the data you need to make sure you're recording in a way that's you trust. Because there's a lot of data and people, that's why they hire data analysts. Help me make sense of this data in a way that I can trust that what it's saying is relevant. And that is how I would answer that question. Is that what you were looking for? Does that help, or is
Yeah,
do you have a follow-up?
thanks. I mean, I guess a follow on, is it sound like, do we need to have like some data analysts in our org? Should we, or how do we address that? Because maybe we don't
Yeah.
have the data we need to build that feature. Or that.
Yeah. LLMs can do a lot these days. So if you're referring to like the vibe coding bootcamp that I help facilitate, it's like leverage them to see like what are the inputs that I need to get here. So if it can help you figure out and use it as a thought partner to figure out what's the data I need, and then you can go to your MongoDB or whatever database to try to make sure it is tracking or recording that data as a part of your build. I don't think you need a data analyst early if you set up your foundations right. But I do think maybe my brother's a or not maybe, he is a data analyst, so maybe I'm a little biased, but I think data analysts are one of the most underutilized or underhired resources in a growing company, because data is your modicum of truth that tells you what's happening and whether you're succeeding or not. And a lot of people waste a lot of time in organizations that I support trying to make sense of data. And a lot of times it's like, okay, this is directional, we think, but we're just going to have to make a call based on what we think we know and hope it's right. And a good data analyst helps you validate and know what you're experiencing is true or not. It's a timing thing, though. Timing and a budget thing.
Awesome, thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kenlin. All right, so last two questions. Is it possible to share the slides right now? Is there a link that you can share? And then lastly, what's the best way to contact you for brief consultation in the future?
Yes, good question. I'm really bad at selling myself. I just don't like doing it, but I appreciate that question.
Yeah. Or you're learning to sell yourself better, Garrett.
Thank you. That's good framing. There's that. You could also, where am I? Okay, there we go. I'll ping this slide in here, and I'm going to share it in email after. I'll share all this in email after as well. And then lastly, my LinkedIn if you want it.
Awesome. So everybody in the chat, Garrett's got his email. He's provided the link for the slides for anybody in real time. And then his LinkedIn profile, go and bomb it. Send him 1,000 requests. Do it right now. Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us in real time. For those of you in Luma and Sidebar, you will get a follow-up email along with a link to the presentation as well. And let us know in the survey what you thought. Garrett, thank you so much for spending some time with us, sharing your wisdom, and answering our questions.
My pleasure.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
To everybody. Thank you.